This is Brass Check, and we're recording this on June 7th, 2020. And we've done a lot of long rants. I'm going to do a really short rant right now. Okay, COVID cases. We keep hearing how many cases there are. Has anybody in the news media made any effort at all to explain to you what constitutes a COVID case? Answer, no. They just throw the numbers around. So this is about what a COVID case is. It is acceptable, in fact, it's being done, to call somebody a COVID case based on one of two highly unreliable means. One, if somebody just has symptoms, they've got a fever, they have a dry cough, that's enough to call it a COVID case. Okay? Could be allergies, could be a cold, could be a garden variety flu, doesn't matter. Now it's a COVID case. So when you hear the number of cases, that's the rigor or the lack of rigor that they're using to call something a COVID case. You don't even know if the guy has COVID at all. The second way they use to call something a case is if somebody is foolish enough to take the COVID test. And I say foolish enough because we know in advance none of these tests are reliable. They produce a lot of false positives. If you're not sick, well, why take a test? Yet you're being told by no less an authority than Governor Andrew Cuomo that everybody needs to get tested. And God forbid that you participated in a demonstration against corruption in the government. And police brutality and police violence is just one variety of government corruption. I'm glad people are coming out for that. They really should come out for the whole shooting match, but we'll take what we can get. I'm glad they're coming out on one aspect of government corruption. But he's made the pronouncement that if you were in any of these protests, you should assume you're infected. I love that. You should assume you're infected. So you go get the test. The test is unreliable. You get a false positive. You have no symptoms. The test is wrong. You are a case now too. So this is why Andrew Cuomo and other dirtbag politicians like him want everybody to get tested, because the more people who get tested, the more, quote, cases they're going to find. And that is people that don't have this thing. They don't have any symptoms. They're not contagious, but they get to call it a case. And this is exactly what Tony Fauci did with AIDS. Now, if you haven't seen any of the AIDS films, you really should. You got to look at them. You got to see the big picture. What they did was they created some bogus, what they called AIDS tests, but were really HIV tests, but turned out not to even be HIV tests either. They turned out to be antibody tests, and you really couldn't be sure what the antibodies were for. But if you were unfortunate enough to take the so-called AIDS test or the HIV test and got a positive antibody test, you probably lost your mind with terror that you were going to die, because you were told you were going to die. And you were told that even if you had no symptoms, didn't have any symptoms this year or next year or 5 years, in 10 years you'd be dead. This was the Tony Fauci line. And using that bit of terrorism, and I don't know what else to call it, it's pure terrorism and fraud. He persuaded hundreds of thousands of people, mostly gay men, but not exclusively, to go on a course of AZT. AZT, which is a carcinogenic, mutagenic chemotherapy that was so dangerous, it was actually banned until Tony Fauci dusted it off and decided it would be a good thing to give to anybody that tested positive on an unreliable AIDS test. So all this is in the films that we put out. They're on the page below. You can watch them. It may sound extreme. It's just history. And as George Sell just said, even the gods can't change history. So he's basically, this is the same old Tony Fauci playbook. Okay? He pulled a disease out of thin air. He exaggerated the hell out of it. He got everybody worried about whether they had it or not. He's gotten everybody getting tested. The tests we know are unreliable because all of these tests are unreliable. They produce a lot of false positives. Oh, they also will, somebody may even have the thing and it might not even show up. So the testing is kind of a joke, but it's not a joke because if you've got it, then they may decide that you need to get some course of antiviral drugs. And if they're like any of the drugs that Fauci has promoted over the last 36 years, they may be fatal to you. So that's the deal. I hope if you haven't watched our films that show the history of AIDS and Tony Fauci's integral role in promoting that fraud. Now, for people that are all up in arms and hysterical about what I'm saying, have people died of collapses of their immune system? Absolutely. Was it a virus that caused their immune system to collapse? Absolutely not. Is there a contagious virus that causes people's immune systems to collapse? Absolutely not. Entirely made up out of thin air. And our films demonstrate that. And, a lot of Nobel Prize winners, like Luc Montagnier, one of the discoverers of AIDS, in fact, the legitimate discoverer, supposedly, of the HIV virus, he doesn't buy Tony Fauci's bullshit. Kary Mullis, the late Kary Mullis, Nobel Prize winner, who created the testing protocol that all these jokers used to find viruses, he didn't think Fauci was for real. We've got video of all this. You're not seeing it because there's a lot of money being spent to make sure you don't see it. So anyway, it's the same old, same old. The more people who get tested, the more cases they're going to discover. And whether those cases mean anything at all, whether they ever lead to anybody symptomatic, you'll never know. Probably not. I mean, we do know that 80% of the people so far, so they say, who've had this thing didn't even know they had it. So that's how meaningful a case is. But they will use the case. They will use the case to keep the economy shut down. They will use the case to restrict your ability to do normal things. They will use the number of cases to get to continue to play the game of emperor for as long as they possibly can. So short rant. I just wanted to give you sort of an overview of where we're at and what's going on.